Welcome to the Teacher Fellows Podcast. My name is Ryan Rarick. I am an education pathway teacher in Washington County School District. And as always, I am joined by my colleague, friend, and the 2020 Utah Teacher of the Year, Lauren Merkley. We have two excellent guests with us today, and Lauren's going to introduce them to us.
All right, we have two guests who are also, as always, our friends, Kelli Cannon and Kiera Bettis. So I'll tell you a little bit about them. Kelli has been an educator for 11 years, first in upper elementary before she became a digital learning specialist. She is a Utah Teacher Fellow, as are Ryan and I, and holds a master's degree in ed tech, as well as endorsements in teaching English as a second language and instructional coaching. She is a Google trainer. She's co-leader of the Google Educator Group in Utah and is also a board member for something we're going to talk about today, the Utah Coalition for Educational Technology, known as UCET. Which leads beautifully into our second guest, Kiera Bettis, who is also a digital teaching and learning specialist. She's in Jordan School District. Prior to this role, she taught secondary ELA, very close to my and Ryan's heart, and history for 10 years. She works with the Utah Teacher Fellows as the social media and outreach specialist, and she is the current president of UCET and believes strongly in the power of technology to eradicate barriers between learners and teachers. So hopefully that's something we'll talk about more today. Thank you so much both for taking some time today.
Thanks for having us. Happy to be here.
We are so excited to jump into our conversation today, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we'll just offer a quick reminder of our format. This intro is the first 5 minutes of the podcast, and then we will get into the interviews with Kelli and Kiera, and then Lauren and I will wrap up with our final thoughts on the final 10-ish minutes. Our topic today is going to be talking about professional organizations. Many professional organizations exist to help teachers build capacity in a variety of areas. As I was preparing for this episode, I just thought of the handful that I could think of off the top of my head. In my life as an English teacher, I participated in UCTE and NCTE. As I've transitioned into other content areas and CTE areas, I've become a member of UACD, and this is alphabet soup for acronyms. I couldn't tell you exactly what each of those means off the top of my head. I know that these organizations are designed around helping teachers build capacity. Of course, I'm a member of the Teacher Fellows, which is also another professional organization. As we often do, the conversation will be free-flowing, so it may drift into other topics as well. But without further ado, let's get started on our conversation about professional organizations with Kelli and Kiera. So, Lauren, start us off.
As we mentioned in the bios, both Kiera and Kelli are involved in UCET, more alphabet soup, which is the Utah Coalition for Education Technology. So when I first heard of UCET, I was like, that's not for me. Like, I'm an English teacher. I want to avoid tech as much as possible. I'm a Luddite. I don't want to be with the book. I think that's actually a deep misunderstanding of what UCET is, because now I've spoken at UCET, I've attended UCET, I've help facilitate sessions at UCET, and I see that quite differently. I wonder if you two could maybe talk about UCET generally and what you might say to a teacher like me, who's a little bit of a tech skeptic, about why this might be a meaningful professional organization to be involved in, either by attending the conference or following on social media or getting involved even at the leadership level. So maybe El Presidente, Kiera, could start us off. How would you respond to that kind of skepticism?
I think it's totally valid, right? Because when you hear the full title, the Coalition for Educational Technology, it feels very niche, right? It's this nerdy group of people who love technology and all the latest and greatest. And while that is a part of it, one thing that we talk about often in the UCET board is how technology are no longer separate things. We live in a world that is so deeply integrated with technology in every aspect of our lives, and that is true with teaching as well. We still acknowledge the very, very human component of education, but something I emphasize when I teach my EdTech endorsement is that you need to select the right tool for the right situation. Sometimes that is a piece of technology, sometimes that's a piece of paper and a pencil, which is in its own right a piece of technology, right?
Totally.
It's all about what you want to accomplish and what's the best tool to accomplish that end goal. And UCET as for someone who's, I'm not a techie person, that's not for me. It's not so much about technology anymore. It's about what makes for good teaching and what is the best way to get there.
I love that. I wrote down a couple of phrases I want to come back to, but Kelli, did you want to jump in? I know you've been involved as a teacher for a couple of years now. So like, how would you respond to someone who's like, I don't want to get involved in that professional organization. It doesn't really sound like my jam.
I think everything that Kiera said was great, of course. Also, too, I was thinking something that we've done in the last couple of years have been to organize all of our sessions into strands. I think these strands are really useful because not just technology strands. If you go to UCET with the mindset of, I want to learn the latest and greatest technology, or I want to spend 2 days learning about robotics or coding or things like that, you'll definitely be able to find it. But just like Kiera said, there are other strands as well, like content area strands. So you can be a math teacher and still participate, or you can do teacher leadership. I know that the fellows are going to have a great strand and there's going to be a lot of speakers there. So there's something that appeals to everybody at UCET. And one thing that I've always loved about it is just everyone coming together and celebrating Utah educators and what we do. And we have a really great state for that. Like Ryan mentioned, there's a lot of different organizations that all have a U in them, like UELMA and now USLA. They partnered with us last year and they're the Librarian Association, and it was great to have them come and be a part of it. Ryan also mentioned like the math teachers and all of those acronyms. So there's a place for everybody at UCET.
I love that. I will say that I spoke on like the keynote stage at UCET this past year when the prior president, Matt, before Kiera, asked me. I was like, no, you don't get it. I'm not going to talk about AI. Like, that's not really my thing. He was like, no. And I was like, well, I would talk about, how you use conversation in the classroom. And Matt was totally into it. And the day I spoke, someone from the National Library Association spoke about censorship. And so it actually was this really beautiful sort of untechnology group of keynotes that complemented, I thought, beautifully the sort of more like ed tech heavy keynotes. So it really rounded out into this very full-bodied picture of what it is to be a teacher in the modern world, whether that's how to navigate tricky conversations digitally or in person, or how to navigate an election cycle digitally or in person. So I love what you both said about kind of tying the humanity of teaching to it and the universality of teaching to it. So thank you. That's perfect for getting us started.
That was something that stuck out to me as well, is that both of you made a comment. Kiera, you mentioned, even though technology and teaching aren't really separate anymore, they coexist and they kind of have to, but we also don't want to lose the human element. And Kelli, you talked about one of the best things about UCET is it's getting everybody together. So that's like a human experience, is that we're going to share this time with each other and have some common goals. And that's going to transition me into the question that I wanted to ask is, what are the ultimate goals for each of your position? You could talk about that as the UCET president and UCET board member, or as digital learning specialists. The second part of that is, how does belonging to a professional organization like UCET or any other help you accomplish that goal with teachers?
So to answer the first part of the question, what's our ultimate goal as digital learning specialists? So our mission from our department is that our team supports educators in facilitating the effective use of technology to enhance student learning. The ultimate goal is enhancing student learning. Notice it does not say using the latest and greatest technology just for the sake of using technology, right? The ultimate goal is always going to be, we want our students to learn as best and as much as they can. And really, our jobs at the end of the day are helping teachers become more proficient, more comfortable, more creative in using technology to reach those student learning objectives. Kind of like what I mentioned earlier, it's what's the right for the situation, using what is available and like where the teacher wants to go. How can we get there together? So I do a lot of brainstorming with teachers. We do a lot of soundboarding. This is my ultimate goal of dreams. This is what I want to accomplish. And we think about, how can we get there? Sometimes it's with technology, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's instructional strategies that we talk about. It's all about what the goal is and how we want to get there. I would say the same thing works for UCET. Our organization exists to provide space for teachers to collaborate, to brainstorm together, to share best practices. The reason why I wanted to become a part of UCET is because I liked the mindset of the people who were involved, because it was very growth mindset oriented. It was very much, I don't know what the answer is yet, but I'm going to get there in the end. It's very comfortable trying to figure things out. That was a space and people that I wanted to be around, that willingness to learn and that willingness to try new things.
Something that Kiera just said is, as you know, the ultimate goal is student learning. I think that would be the goal for any organization related to teaching. And the question I have for you is, another part of what Kiera said is, when you're having these conversations as a digital learning specialist or as a member of UCET or at UCET with teachers, we're trying to figure out, like, how are we going to accomplish that goal? And sometimes it's with technology, other times it might be an instructional strategy. And something that I've experienced relatively frequently as an instructional coach, teachers will ask me how to utilize a digital tool, and that actually opens the door to talk about, well, what are your learning goals? What strategies are going to lead to that outcome? So I'm curious what your experience has been like with that, and how has technology led to some of those conversations about maybe instructional techniques or ways to improve student learning?
That's a big question. First off, to answer that question, I think that something that I've had to get over in this position is stereotypes. I think a lot of times, like, age divides us when it comes to digital use, right? I remember going to one of the first UCET conferences I went to my first year of teaching, which was 2014, a long time ago. One of the presenters said the older generation that's coming to technology, they are the digital immigrants, right? Like, they're learning technology. And then people maybe like millennials were the digital natives because we grew up with this kind of technology. But then our students can be considered digital heirs because they're inheriting all this technology, but they don't really know what to do with it. It's our job to train them and teach them on things we didn't have growing up. Just like changing that perspective has been interesting. I think the stereotypes of you're a young person and you can't teach me anything, or not feeling comfortable with technology if they are a digital immigrant or whatever that might be, then we come in and people will say things to me a lot like, you just clicked a bunch of buttons and I don't know what you did. Technology is an equalizer. It helps put everybody on a level playing field. I think that's true. There are people of all ages who struggle with technology, so don't feel bad if you're a young person that's having a hard time. There are all kinds of like personality types and teaching and situations where they're just learning and growing. Like Kiera said, I love that innovative mindset of just trying something and failing and then trying again. I've always felt like people in UCET and just people who attend the conference are really supportive of each other, and they really just care about each other and cheer each other on. I like that because it makes it feel less competitive and more like we're all in this as a team together and we want what's best for our students.
100%. I think the comments that you made about the stereotypes absolutely ring true. And I think they ring true both directions, right? With maybe the digital natives toward the digital immigrants. I guess what I'm thinking is it's self-efficacy. It's like, oh, I'm not good at this or I'm good at that. The real truth is, whether we're teachers or students, we all can learn. And that never stops.
I was also thinking I love this formulation of the digital immigrants, the digital natives, and the digital heirs. I was thinking about my students. I haven't been in the classroom now for 2 years. I'm home with my little baby, but I was thinking about even 2 years ago that students, at least my students, I felt like were beginning to push back a little bit on technology in the classroom, that they were the heirs, that they were inheriting some things they didn't necessarily want, that they're like, oh, I don't want to like learn a new tool. Maybe I want to break from the Chromebook. But it's interesting to think about that interplay that, you know, you inherit stuff you don't necessarily want to inherit, that you got to like kind of deal with in some way. Being an immigrant into a new territory is challenging in all of its ways. Being a native is challenging. Like, each of those roles is sort of a shape-shifting challenge and presents different obstacles for everyone in each level. So it's not like the natives necessarily have it easy. They're kind of the transitionary, you know, generation trying to figure out how to help people on both sides of that divide. While the younger generation, I think, is maybe the pendulum swinging back a little bit. So I think that's a really nice formulation to think about the ways all these different generations are interacting with technology.
I want to tie this back into the idea of UCET as a professional organization. What would you say to teachers that feel a little bit overwhelmed with time demands and the thought of joining a new organization sometimes accompanies the thought of additional responsibility? Something I've learned is that when I join organizations and belong to a group of people, I actually become a lot more efficient. The capacity builds to be able to handle more things. So actually by belonging to those organizations, I'm more effective. And why should a teacher join an organization like you said, or any other organization when they feel like their time is so thin already?
I think about when I first encountered UCET and the different activities that they sponsor. It was an ed camp, first of all. And I was a baby teacher in Juab, so rural Utah. My whole department, my whole English department was 5 teachers, right? I was going from a situation where I was trying new things. I really liked the people that I worked with, but I definitely felt alone in some areas of my learning and my pedagogy and what I was trying to do in my classroom. When I came across UCET, it's exactly what Ryan talked about. I found a place where these people thought like me. They were willing to try new things. They were excited about what they were doing. They were passionate about teaching and learning and that growth mindset that I mentioned earlier. It gave me a place to belong virtually. I connected with people at UCET through Utah Ed Chat on Twitter for years before I joined the conference. And when I did start going to the conference, I just wanted more. I wanted to be more involved, and that's when I started to run for the board. And when I got on the board, running eventually for president. And so finding a place where you can belong, I think saved me as a professional. It gave me the support network that I needed to stay in teaching, because teaching is hard. UCET is also what connected me with the fellows, because the fellows are participating in Utah Ed Chat. When I think of teachers who are like, I can't add one more thing to my plate, I would argue that it rejuvenates and refreshes you so that you can tackle the things that you have to by giving you new ideas, people to bounce ideas off of, and just inspiration maybe when you need it the most.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. To kind of like echo that as well, just having people that you feel have got your back, that are supporting you, is really, really helpful when you're going through those really hard times as a teacher, especially when your students don't understand, your students are out to get you, and your administration isn't there to help you. You know that you can rely on these people in your professional network that will listen to you, and they've been there before, and they can relate and they understand. It's nice to have those friendships, especially around the state. I participated in with the fellows and also with UCET. I've gotten to go to a bunch of places in Utah that I never thought I would be able to see and know people there, and just see like a perspective of education as a whole. And you're not just in like your little classroom anymore. You get to see it on like a state perspective or like a global perspective. I really like that. I will say one thing about the fellows, which is I really enjoyed my time here because I've been able to build a lot of leadership capabilities. I feel like if you're a teacher that's looking to make an impact outside of your classroom, then joining a professional organization will be something that helps you develop your voice, your leadership skills, and just overall being able to advocate for your students. I think that's what we all care about, and what we all want is to make sure our students are heard and that someone is there to give them a voice.
I love both of those things. And I've got some takeaways, actually, a great transition. As it often does, our time flies by on these podcasts, and there's about 500 other questions and topics and deeper exploration that we want to go to. But we're going to transition now into our closing thoughts here. Lauren, I want to ask you, as you listen to Kelli and Kiera talk to us today about UCET, about the implementation of technology in the classroom, about joining professional organizations, what are some things that stuck out to you the most?
So there are 2 things. The first, I was actually looking, as they were talking, I was looking through my notes from UCET this past year, because I was like, oh, there's this one, they were reminding me of this one presentation, and it was Richard Kulada. Is that how you say it? Okay. Who's the CEO of ISTE, which is Kiera, stands for the
International Society for Technology and Education.
Thank you so much. That was a test you passed. He spoke and he talked about using AI in the classroom. And so at first I was like, bah, bah, AI in the classroom, like not my thing. But he threaded this amazing needle because he talked about how using AI in the classroom actually creates more room for teachers to teach their students the things that technology can never teach our students, like judgment, ethics, moral reasoning, have productive dialogue and discourse. I thought, oh my gosh, this guy has done the impossible, right? Like taken a keynote on artificial intelligence and turned it into the most human topic about how we help our students become people that are poised to enter a world with empathy and with sound judgment and with compassion and with an open spirit. So I was just thinking about that when Kiera was talking about technology as a tool, right? It may not even be a tool that's helping us do those things. It may just be a tool that creates room to actually and time for kids to grapple with the more difficult aspects of being human. My second takeaway was I was thinking about a colleague at Cottonwood who has since retired. And I remember she stood up an end of school lunch and everyone who was retiring said a few words. And she said that the kids will get you into teaching, but it is your colleagues that keep you in teaching. I was thinking about that as Kiera and Kelli shared the impact that their involvement in UCET has had. That one benefit of expanding that network, your professional learning network through a professional organization, is you simply have more colleagues. You simply have more people that are going to keep you in the education space, whether you stay in the classroom or like you have transitioned into more of a specialist role. I think that's another kind of unexpected benefit of getting involved in a professional organization is you just invest deeper and there's more people that are going to keep you in the profession because the kids will leave. You'll have kids, they'll graduate, they'll move. There will always be new kids, but you're starting over with kids every year. But if you build this network, that network is really like a bedrock for your career. I have like 7 other things written down, but in the interest of time, those are my top 2 that I've been thinking about the most.
Those were 2 great ones because they align exactly with what I wrote down. One of the things that I wrote down early on in this conversation was that concept of protecting the humanness of teaching. I think that a lot of the times, and when Kelli mentioned that concept of stereotypes, I think sometimes we think that the technology will take away that part. Like you said, Lauren, like sometimes the kids want to break from the Chromebook. But what I think technology has at its best the ability to do is to give us more time for the human parts of teaching. We can utilize some of those tools to speed up the things that take us away from interacting with our students and focus more on the learning, like we said, was the primary goal. And then the second part of that is Kelli mentioned the concept of professional networks. That was something that was introduced to me a few years ago. Is we talk a lot about PLCs, like in our school, our professional learning communities, but our professional network expands far beyond the walls of our school. Kiera mentioned that concept of like teachers that are like, I can't add another thing to my plate. What these professional networks do is they help us have a bigger plate. Going out and climbing a giant hill every morning, it gets you stronger so that years later, climbing that hill is a much simpler task, not because the hill changed or anything like that, but because your capacity to climb it improved. That was my biggest takeaway, is that technology has that ability to keep the humanity and actually allows us to emphasize the humanity more. Those professional networks allow us to build our capacity in a way that the tasks never get easier, but our ability to handle them becomes superior. I would encourage anybody listening to this, if they don't already belong to a professional network, whether that's a professional organization or any other way that you can build a professional network, to start seeking that out. And that will actually improve our ability to handle all of these things that we're managing in the classroom instead of taking away from the classroom. Those are my final thoughts. I'd just like to once again say thank you to Kelli and Kiera for joining us today. And Lauren, thank you always for being my co-host and for sharing your thoughts. But anyway, that's going to be it for the podcast today. Thank you again to Kiera and Kelli for joining us, and to all of you for listening to us. Please continue to listen and spread the word to others as well. And also be on the lookout for the UCET conference that is coming up soon. You can subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Music, Stitcher, or any other podcast platform. Check us out on Instagram for our breakout videos. We produce episodes every month. This podcast, as always, was produced by the wonderful Kayla Towner. For my co-host, Lauren Merkley, this is Ryan Rarick. Thanks for listening, everybody.